and then hoping everything syncs up. Okay, all right, looks like we got it. Hello and welcome. This is the Electric Dice Podcast, and today we've got another really awesome creator interview. Ben Robbins has joined us. And there's so many different things I could say here because I was trying to figure out the order in my head because it's the website Ars Ludi, Lame Mage Productions, and then we've got Follow, Microscope, Kingdom, Union. There's so many, but do you want to jump in there and tell us a little bit about your favorite child if you had to pick one?
Yeah, it's rough because they're all it's like you said, favorite child. They're all one big family. That they're all, each one has come from the past one. The connections between I used to be entirely a D&D player, and that years and years of playing D&D led to what I did with West Marches, which led to what I started doing with kind of moving to more story games, which led to Microscope, and they're all interconnected. I know there's a lot of people who like to draw hard lines between this kind of fun, that kind of fun. I've been really lucky. I think that there's been a lot of different types of gaming that I've really enjoyed, and also a lot of different cultures of play. Doing Story Game Seattle for years, where I really saw a very different side of playing. Not like this is my regular group every week. Just being exposed to strangers all the time and learning to game with them, which is super educational and super interesting.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I really want to get into today too. Before I get too far ahead of myself, is just not only the story gaming and that is the driving force as opposed to something that's more like mechanics, game design obviously there, but looking for that story, and then just the sheer amount of playtesting you do, and then the sheer amount of new people you bring into the hobby, or let's try this out. Con games are such a unique thing, and I'm a huge fan of them. Obviously, I love going to Gen Con, New York Comic Con, and I'd love to make it to Metatopia, which I've not been able to do. But just it's such a different dynamic. We were talking a little bit before we got live there, and different people coming to the table for different reasons, and then how much time you have for a 2-hour game, or a 1-hour game even, versus you see every week. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think the con thing, even when we were doing Story Game Seattle, and we do Story Game Seattle, and then we do things we do games on demand setups at different cons, and it was we're doing what we do once a year at a con, but we're doing it every week. We're meeting with strangers, we're sitting down and playing, and what's fascinating is really how so much of the stuff that's unspoken with your friends when you play it together all the time, you have to talk about. You have to be explicit, because you're you don't know these people, you don't know what they're expecting. You really have to get a lot of that stuff out on the table, and it's great because it actually gives you much better at expressing the details of what you're doing, and why are we doing this, what do we intend, what are we getting out of this, what's going to make people happy and unhappy. And you don't want to spend all day just talking theory, right? You want to play. But so we got really good at kind of what's the exact right thing we can talk about that will get us straight to gaming and have a good time. Let's not spend hours talking theory. Let's figure out the things we have to say to each other to get on the same page and have some fun. And the games that I made, starting with Microscope and all the way through Follow, Kingdom, Union now, all of them stem from those experiences, from playing at the table with people and being playing so many games that were good games but were really hard to navigate through. It's how can we condense this to something that's so straightforward that a bunch of strangers can sit down, just follow the procedure and have some fun.
That's cool to hear. I'm a big fan of that. It's something I find myself saying a lot is, we're going to play to see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And that discovery aspect of it. But I like the idea, and that's really responsible game design, to say we want to not make it difficult. We don't want to make people kind of jump to conclusions or work super hard to get the story. Instead, we're going to give them this really tight-knit series of tools that is going to help them do that.
Yeah, because it is also the everybody. It goes without saying, everybody's different. Everybody has different things they like. But it's the difference of there's different things we like aesthetically, people have different taste, and that's okay. We're gonna disagree. I think that's the thing that people sometimes struggle with, is that disagreement is not a problem. Disagreement about what you like is natural and is going to happen. The question just is, how can we follow some kind of procedure that will get us to all do something we're all reasonably happy with, right? Instead of it might be the best thing ever. Audio a little behind.
Yeah,
Should we talk faster?
that would help definitely. So it's, I hate to keep referencing other interviews. It makes me feel awful and dirty.
No, it's okay.
But,
It's a continuum. It's a
it's
continuum of experiences. It's like
it's the same thing that happened last time. So that time I was lucky enough to not know. I went through the whole interview just blind, right? And then because I didn't know, it didn't upset me. And then I found out, and I got mad all offline. So now I kind of knew ahead of time, and I tested a couple different things. It's one of the reasons I was really happy with Discord, is it seemed not to be the case.
So there's like a faint sound delay between our mouths moving and the thing.
Yeah. So
this is like singing in the rain. This is awesome. We can do a little like. Actually, I'm not really talking. I'm Ben's face model. Ben is actually very shy and is behind me talking, and I'm just trying to make my mouth move at the right speed.
So that
I didn't want to bring it up, but it's there. Sorry, guys. It's out. It's out. The truth is out.
So I will actually say that, and now this will create a weird conversation, and that's what we love to do in interviews, right? When I was kind of the first time when I started doing the interviews again with the podcast, Daniel Fox puts himself out there very much as the face is Zweihander, right? In fact, Zweihander doesn't really seem to have much of a logo beyond the text version Zweihander. Now you, on the other hand, have very clean, very elegant, follow Microscope. They're very clear. I like them a lot. But trying to find you was very tricky, and I'm happy to say I did. Somebody had a photo on your Twitter, and you had like a tag that said Ben. I was like, I got him, right? But I was like, clearly, the robot is the logo. You know what I mean?
I'm just not. I haven't really adapted. I think I'm just not too into the like the whole social media thing, like showing your face all the time. I'm just not really my bag. I mean, I guess there's lots of interview footage, things like this. Like for now, anybody who wants to take 1 million stills of me to make commemorative sweatshirts, this is your opportunity. It does happen, but yeah, you're right. I don't really do a lot of the like social media presence kind of stuff, right? I communicate through my games.
Sure. I mean, and you communicate effectively. So I swore I did this on Facebook. I'm going to do it to you now, and then I'm going to stop. I'm not typically starstruck. I find myself, I can converse with pretty much anybody. That never really bothers me. But James Marsters at New York Comic Con 2010, right? I just walked up to him, and he just looks at me, and I was like, hi. And he's like, you look like a musician. I was like, oh, God, no. I was like, I'm just a disappointment, man. He's like, nah, that's not true. And then we had a fun. So James Marsters and you, like, the West Marches in general, marches. I go back and Marches. Okay. Marches. That was what I expected. West Marches and Microscope are just like absolutely seminal works. They're gaming artifacts. Like if we needed people to be like, well, what was gaming? What was tabletop gaming? What was D&D? What was it about? What were people trying to do with it? West Marches to me is just like about as perfect as it can get. It's just straight experience of gaming.
There's a lot of dead player characters who wouldn't agree with you. That's not true. I'm lying. The people the players on West Marches had a great time. I can say with 100% confidence, we all were real into it. I mean, even when it was frustrating, even when it was like, oh no, someone's dead, unexpectedly, we really enjoyed it a lot. But I think part of it, and I guess maybe this applies to Microscope too, is that was never my intention. I never was like, I'm going to make something. Right. And I think I was just trying to do something particular. I had a goal in mind, and I was trying to accomplish it. And I really wasn't thinking about the outside world at all. In fact, I didn't even write the West Marches posts until like 6 or 7 years after the game. I mean, I was like, oh, we played a game. It was cool.
I want to say it was 2007 the first time you posted about it?
Yeah. And the games were 2001, 2000 to 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really is. I think it's that honesty of like, I'm doing it for the table. I'm doing it for us players. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it, and that's I think what makes it what it really is. There's not a marketing attempt. It's not like it's like, and I think that the West Marches particularly comes out of my old school D&D play. It's mm-hmm. like kind of this trying to capture that feeling. From even back like I played D&D first time in the early 80s, in like February of 1980. Was my first D&D game, and trying to get that feeling again of like, okay, this like sense of there's stuff out there, I don't know what it is, and it might be really dangerous, and let's go out and explore it, and like, but a real sense that the world is real, and that the world it's not just the GM making stuff up and saying like, okay, fine, you're fine. It's like, no, the world itself has some kind of independent validity that none of us really control exactly, and that's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
But again, and then I turn around and make Microscope, which is the exact opposite, which is where we know we're making the world on the fly, and we know it is merely a creation, but it becomes magical because we share it. So
I don't know that, to jump around a little bit, I don't know that there's a game or a system of rules or any sort of like agreed upon social contract that does a better job than Microscope. Like, I bring that with me every time I run a game now, because it's like, here's a thing, it happened. Here's a thing, it's going to happen. These are what we want to see, right? But all other things are pushed to the edges, right? The why doesn't matter, It's like, because sometimes, and I never pronounce the word right, verisimilitude. Right?
Oh, verisimilitude. Verisimilitude? Because it's like similarity. It is the similarity verisimilitude. I think that's right.
Great
Somebody
word.
look that up.
Yeah.
Somebody go onto the internet and look that up. We have the entire internet.
Right.
Get on there. You can do it, guys.
Somebody can prove they're smart.
Verisimilitude. I think that's what. Yeah.
It's an interesting
verisimilitude. Verisimilitude.
This is the whole stream, by the way.
Yeah. This is the stream. That's all we do. Yeah. Exactly. Is it verisa? Okay.
I don't think that's it.
I think this person has the internet. I believe them. Anyway, you're saying it's true, very verite, true, similarity. It is true to the thing it is trying to be. If I'm breaking down the word root right, verity, truth.
Getting Latin in there? Is that what's happening?
I'm just looking at the things and saying like that's what must. Yeah, verity, truth. Truth. It's similar to the truth, similar to the thing that is being truth. Yeah, there you go. The appearance of being true or real.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good job.
Good thing we have smart people in chat.
Thanks, chat.
I just know what it means is sometimes you don't want your players to know that it's a game, like you said, that it's not just a DM making things up. And there's definitely a time, there's a place for that, and sometimes it's for game styles, and sometimes it's for people in general. But to me, and what I see a lot of like new game design embracing is like, we're all here together, it's all of our story, right? In a very clear and concrete way. And in that way, there's nothing more powerful than like, here's a decision, help me figure out why, right? And that's what I took from Microscope is like, people who have like writing teams, like Aaron Sorkin talks about this a lot with giving was it Martin Sheen MS, right? He's like, I didn't know going into it, right? And the reason I did it was, I forget the reason why he did it, but the vehicle in which he did it was the first lady being a doctor, right? And then she had to like, and that's a thing, like, if he knew that, if he knew that at the beginning, he might have made different choices, but the fact was he didn't let it be a problem later. He just embraced it and figured out how it worked. And to me, that's story gaming, right? Is like, it's going to be a little messy sometimes, but we're going to, do these things and then try and understand them. We're going to play to see what happens.
Yeah, and it's very much the process matters more than the end result. It's not about making a perfect story, because it's about us making it's us making our story, right? It's that's a trap that people fall into sometimes. Like, wouldn't it be better if X? Like, no, well, that's not the question. The question is, did the people involved get to express themselves? And that will often make. So, like, a lot of times people talk about war stories. Like, tell me about this thing that happened at the table. And what I would tell you about a game we played will be boring, because that's not interesting. The fiction's not interesting. It just isn't. We like to think it is because we were there and we really enjoyed it. But the reason we're really enjoying it is not because the fiction was really good. It's because the process we went to create the fiction, that backstory, that process is what really struck us. Like the Madamus story that you were talking about before. Oh
God, beautiful.
Yeah. And it's that is a good story, but the process of why that happened is really what kicks it off. And I think that's true of so many gaming stories. Like, whenever if I write like a game report, what we played kind of thing, mm-hmm. To me, it's not like this is the fiction. It's this is how the rules interacted with us as players, and how this person's idea bounced off this, and that's why we got this thing. The end story might not be better than, well, sometimes it's amazing, but that's not the point. The point is to say how the game allowed us to be authors together, because that's the part that's amazing.
Yeah, every D&D story, every tabletop story is just, well, you had to be there, right? Because you start telling people and nobody's 100%. As excited as you are.
Exactly. Yeah. There's another thing, which is I buddies of mine who GM, and I have to tell them the sad truth, which is that The players don't care about your plots. The players are not there for your complicated plot about the necromancer and all the tower. They don't care about any of that stuff. They care that they like faced down a troll and rolled a 20. Like 5 years from now, that's the part of the story they're going to remember. They're going to remember the things they did moment by moment, and you might be like, but that was irrelevant. That was trivial. It's like, no, that's the story. What they did is the story, you know? Even if it seems like it's a trivial combat to you, but they did really well. They love it.
I think that's largely lacking in the board game space. Is that in the sense of retelling the story, or not having the? I'm not sure what they mean. Oh, I was looking at chat. Sorry.
Oh yeah. I think you're talking about with West Marches that made me. Oh, the whole like is the world real, right? Those two kind of styles of play, right? Like
yeah.
The thing that's interesting, I think, because I like both in different situations. I think the key thing is we agree which one we're doing. But what I think is the ingredient that makes the GM'd, like when I used to GM and I had a long time campaign world, I had this like unfair advantage in the sense that because I'd played the same game world for like 20 years, the players had no idea which elements were things I had made up yesterday and which elements were things that had literally been in the game world for like a decade or more. And so they treated everything as real. So it was a great cheating method. Even brand new players were like, oh no, this world's been around forever. Everything is not just being made up on the fly. So and I think it gave them license to kind of embrace it as real. I didn't have to sell it. Like I didn't have to convince them of that fact. It just made it feel real because in a way it was a creation we had all this time.
I definitely am guilty of doing that sometimes. When I talk about like levels of DMing, that's a thing that comes up a lot because like, and you know, like these are obviously very vague, but the idea of like, you know, panicked and over preparation, right, to the umpteenth degree, and like really stuck on railroads, and then like this kind of gradual relaxation into like my best game is one I didn't prepare anything for. And like I think that there's levels past that because like you can do that and it is very powerful, but really all you're doing is saying yes to players. You're letting them have a say in it, and you will find yourself making mistakes. You'll find yourself contradicting yourself. You won't have as tight of a gameplay. I mean, unless you're the best note taker. That's what I always tell people. Like, Dave, what should I do? I'm like, take better notes. Like, oh, take good notes. Like, take better notes. Like, because
but that whole thing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I say no. The whole thing you're talking about, the urge to like railroad, I think it comes from a good place. It's you as the GM are for some reason, social contract wise, responsible for the fun. Like it's your game, quote unquote. You have invited people to play. You are responsible and you're preparing, and so you want it to go well. You want people to have fun, and not knowing what's going to happen can be terrifying. So it's like, well, okay, I'll prepare a lot of stuff. I'll make sure I got enough stuff covered. I'll make sure I've got a really good, awesome plot that the players will really enjoy. And any element that's unknown is frightening because you're like, well, will that be fun? I don't know. So I think that kind of like controlling GM is a natural desire to make things right. I just think it then gets way out of control. And it's funny because look at it from the flip side. The players are like, I got no idea what's going to happen. I'm going to show up. I brought an elf. But they're comfortable with it because they don't have any responsibility. They know that's the deal. And then if you take that further, right, now you jump forward in my life 15 years, and now I'm at Story Game Seattle, and I'm showing up on a Thursday night, and I'm theoretically organizing this event, and I have no idea who's going to show up. No idea. It's going to be random every time. It's never the same people. And I have no idea what we're going to play. I don't even know who's going to run games. I'm just going to sit there, and I'm going to look at everybody, I'm going to tell them what we're going to do, and I'm going to ask for volunteers, and we're going to figure it out. And that's 100% nobody, not even me, knows what's going to happen tonight. We're all on the same boat. It's kind of terrifying, but that's the fun. Is this like none of us are preparing the excitement. We're going to sit down with the people at the table and see what happens. And so on one hand, terrifying, but then when it works, it's so rewarding because you're like, wow, I never would have thought of those things, and those simply emerged from the random combination of people at the table at that time. So it's fascinating that our hobby gaming has this whole huge spectrum of these possibilities, right? That all of these things are possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll try and put us on some rails now for a moment because I think that's
rails. Yeah, chat's getting sick of us. Oh, 20 on the dragon mid fight. Exactly. You will never forget that. The nat 20. That's the moment, right? And everyone else is like, that's not what that game was about. And you're like, actually, it was nat 20.
Well, and to that end, before we try and get back on the rails, it's interesting that you pointed out like the DM being the owner of like having that fun and everything, but it's like they want to have fun too, and sometimes their fun is like this tough thing, and the most fun moment is the player hosing that dragon, right? Not having 7 rounds of arduous combat, but one nat 20 that just kills it, and they're like, no, I didn't have fun, I'm upset. That doesn't happen. There's 2 dragons, and then the player's like, oh, I've been ruined. And that balance, man.
And I think that if I would say one thing about that the bad syndrome there is it's that the GM is responsible. The GM owns the game, and that's a terrible tradition we have, I think. And weirdly enough, like in West Marches, part of getting away from that was making the players schedule. The players controlled the sessions. The players decided when we played. They were responsible for making the groups, and that, even though theoretically I'm still Lord of the Universe, they are now. We're shifting the dynamic of like who's in charge, who's scheduling. It becomes a lot less my game and becomes a lot more I'm just the referee of the game they're choosing to play, which was so much more fun, so much more relaxing, a much more better time. So
yeah.
Sorry, let's get on somewhere else.
No, you're good. I this was just a trick to get to talk about West Marches for an hour and a half. The whole like. I came in 1999, 2000, so 3rd edition was like the first game I actually played. But all of my DMs had only played 2nd edition up until that moment, you know what I mean? And now with all that, all these years of experience, I can look back and see who was kind of like understanding what 3rd edition had changed and who was still playing 2nd edition. So I feel like I kind of understand what you mean, but you were like completely, you were watching too. You know what I mean? You didn't have an ego with those orcs trying to pin them down, right? Like the orcs were there, they simply were, and everyone just looked at the battle map to try and figure out what was happening. When 2nd edition didn't care about a battle map, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in the frustration of in older editions having to constantly educate, like, can I get there in time? You'll take another round. Can I circle that guy? Sure you can. You can't. It was a lot of work. We should probably we should have really asked, like, does anybody know? I forgot to I should describe like what Microscope and West Marches are in case Chad has no idea what I'm talking about.
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay, so do a quick so West Marches is an old D&D game I ran. The core premise of West Marches was that it was an exploration game, and the key structure was that instead of just being like a single group of players, like this is the party, it was a larger group, and the players were responsible for deciding for themselves where they were going to go and what they were going to do, and they had to schedule online with other players and form a party, go on an adventure, come back to town. And so you got this whole dynamic of like different people like kind of competing to get to things on time, people sharing stories of things they had found in the wilderness. But it was like a sandbox game before that was even really very common parlance, with a larger field of players all exploring the same sandbox and all trying to make it back to safety, and trying to survive. And it was entirely, I was a very neutral arbiter of the physics. I would roll in the open. Like, I'd be like, this guy has a +5, and I roll. Well, that's a 17. We all know he hit you. Here's the damage. So there was no GM fudging. There was no GM control. It's very much like I am, the mechanical system. And Microscope, if you haven't heard of it, is a game where you sit down together at the table and you make a vast epic history of some kind. And you're all authors of this history together. But one of the weird things about Microscope is that instead of just like going forward in time, like we're going to just go chunk, what happens next, we actually go the other way around. We do a big picture. We know how the story's going to end, and then we jump back and forth and zoom in on the different parts of the story that we think are interesting. So it might be 10,000 years of history, but we might wind up zooming way in and studying the life of this one guy who was a border guard at one point in this city, because that's the part of the story we like. And then maybe we jump back 2,000 years before that and find out how the city was founded, or 5,000 years later and find out how the city is destroyed and burned to the ground. It's totally up to us, and it puts us as the players in a creative driver's seat. And it's can be pretty hairy, because if you make something awesome, like make this beautiful city, a minute later could be like, and it's destroyed with a nuclear weapon, and it's gone. And everyone's like, what? That happens.
It does
But because
happen.
you're not limited to chronological order, you could be like, okay, cool, well that happens. I know that's how the city's destroyed, but I'm going to go back and still explore what led up to those events, right? Nothing is ever removed from the game. It's, like people die, but their life is still there. You can still go back and explore as much of their life as you want to, and that change in the dynamic really changes the way we create. We create. Is he watching chat? He is watching chat. Is this guy in chat? I'm not in chat, but I'm watching chat.
That's right. Sorry.
Can't type at the same time, but I am watching chat. Anyway, so those are the two. That's what we're talking about. We're prattling on about West Marches and Microscope as everyone knew what we're talking about, but maybe they don't.
Don't be weird, John.
Say something in chat. Something in chat. Easy.
Nailed it.
I'm not even on. Yeah. Anyways, sorry, you had some questions.
Yeah, all right. Back to the rails. Got him. Okay, so and we talked a little about these. So there's no blindsiding here. Something that I find really interesting but kind of nebulous. So I really wanted to hear your answer. Is just what the heck is fun? What do you define it as? How do you hear other people talking about it? How do you recognize it? And why is that so important?
It's kind of like we talked earlier about like people like different things aesthetically. They totally like different things. So like one way to look at fun is like I like something different than you do, so that's different types of fun. I think for our purposes, for gaming purposes, what really is going to define fun is when you feel like you belong in the process, and you feel like you're being listened to, and you feel like your contributions matter. Like if you're at any gaming table, I don't care what the game is, I guarantee you, if you don't feel like you fit in, and if you don't feel like people want to listen to what you say, you are not having fun, right? You are in a difficult relationship. On the other hand, you could be playing a game that's like, well, this isn't my total cup of tea, this is not my favorite thing in the world, but I'm here and I belong and I'm contributing, and that contribution matters to other people. That's going to be fun. And so I've focused on that aspect of it. Like, if the people sitting their butts at the table feel good about being there, all good things will follow. And if you can't get that part right, almost nothing else matters.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing that you said, that I would also really focus on then too is like the being heard, right? And that's like super important to me. Like I hinted at real earlier, and I tell this story all the time, so most of my chat will recognize it. But I quite literally had no friends from 7th grade until 9th grade. The group of people that I was hanging out with just ostracized me. They were like, that Dave guy, we don't like him anymore.
Yeah.
So playing D&D Monday nights every week was like the time I got to interact with people. And that was exactly what it was, right? Like, and I even watched it kind of change how my younger brother, who's 11 years younger than me, communicated with people, because we were all much older than him, but we were listening to what he said, right? Like when he was there and it was his turn, it was important. His ideas could be good and could be recognized by people he respected. And like, so the, why are they at this table, and are they enjoying it? Absolutely, right. But the being heard was like always what's really important to me. Like, yeah, when you come here, your ideas matter, or your whole night might just be, I made a joke and somebody laughed. Like, cool, that was fun.
Yeah, and the worst, even in totally traditional stable groups, people go through phases where they're kind of like, do I matter to this group? Do I fit in? How important am I? It's a very normal social questioning thing, and I think for games. So I mean, with a stable group, there's always a whole social dynamic of like friendship, whatever. When you're playing with strangers, you don't know each other at all, right? You have nothing to go on. So to establish, like, I don't know you, but your contribution is vital to what we're doing. In fact, part when we'd welcome people at Story Game Seattle, part of the intro spiel was that this process, your contribution is vital. Like, you have to contribute. We want to hear what you have to say. And that if you don't contribute, nothing's going to happen. We can have a terrible game. The game could be bad, the game could be good, but regardless, we want to hear what you have to say. And one of the things that I think when I was doing Microscope that really bugged a lot of people initially, I got a lot of pushback against this. And I think maybe it's been long enough that people have calmed down about it, but at the time people were not happy as a design decision. The fact that Microscope makes you talk, Microscope says you can't pass, you can't not take your turn, you can't say, hey, someone give me an idea. That I mean, people might do that, but the rules say do not do that. That is illegal. The rules say if we have to sit quietly for a couple of minutes to get someone to talk, we'll do that. We're fine with that. That's okay. And what I found doing that was that I would hear from people who otherwise were very happy to never contribute. They were okay being there, but they were being quiet. But hearing them talk, hearing them contribute, and then hearing ideas that I never would have thought of was amazing, like amazing stuff. And realizing that you'd only be seeing like a fraction of this person before, and now suddenly you're saying like, oh wow, you have very cool ideas, or just ideas I never even thought of, right? Like, and that makes the game fun because now I'm surprised, I'm interested in being here because I didn't know where this was going. So.
No, I absolutely love that, and it's funny too because I said something very similar the other day. Was because I've tried to take some of those tenets of Microscope and bring them into my regular gaming. Because I'll disappoint you here for a moment. I don't know that I've ever played Microscope rules as written. I think
that's okay. That happens.
I've ripped pages out that I liked and left a few of them over there. Right.
The question is, did you forget the details? Did you embrace the core concept of the game?
Oh boy, I hope so.
Did you not contradict each other?
No,
that's the real question,
and that's exactly what I was getting to. Because I said we did a game that was set in a plague city. We probably did about 20 sessions. At the beginning of every session, we took a half hour. Everybody ran around the table. We had picked one faction to define, and everybody would have to choose something about it. Tell me something about who runs it. Tell me about why they're doing it. Right? Nobody can contradict each other. You can build on it if they're cool with it. Right? And then that was exactly what happened. Is we would go around, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I love this so much, and sometimes I'm like, you put that in my game, my special game. Now I have to play with this thing, and I hate it.
Yeah. But that's the interesting thing. Like, another kind of really fortuitous thing about the Microscope model is that because you do jump to where you want, if someone does introduce something that you're not interested in, just don't build there. Like, if they blow up the city, you don't want to talk about blowing up the city, just go to the past when the city's still there. Right. We had some game, it was like a post-apocalyptic game, and one player kind of just on a lark threw in like a cannibal village, like they lure people in and they eat them, and I was like, cannibals, come on, man. Like, in my head I'm like, cannibals, how does that work as a stable society? I just didn't want to deal with it. And it was like, and we just we did a little bit there, but they were like, when it was my turn, I just built elsewhere. I just didn't run with it. I mean, so that's part of the beauty of it. You don't have to, like in a chronological order game, whatever happens, the next thing that happens right after that. You're stuck with it, right? You're stuck with what just happened. If someone blew up the city, now the city's blown up. But when the game's not chronological, you don't have that problem.
It's beautiful. So the reason I said spice earlier, because chat says, piggybacking on fun, something I've been working through is, what do you define as a game? And the reason I said spice is because that was like everybody's favorite thing to shout from the rooftops. Microscope's not a game, man.
Oh, I know. I love it. I love it.
To me, a toy is anything you can play with. But, they're not here to listen to me talk. They want to hear you talk.
Well, so Sid Meier has a great definition of game, which is a series of interesting choices. A game is a series of interesting choices. And if the choices aren't interesting, if you don't have, like, which should I pick, then you're out of game territory. I feel like that. I feel like if you're not hitting that, you probably don't have a game, which gets into interesting territory with a lot of computer games where you go like, well, am I making any decisions in this game? Or am I just following a path? Is it a novel that I'm really experiencing?
Right.
Yeah, but I think I think it's fun to talk about like labels and stuff, but I think it's tough when people are using labels to kind of like, that's not part of the team, like that game's out of the pale. That's when I think it gets a little destructive, when people are really just trying to draw a line and be like, that's not in my hobby. So, and here's another thing. Here's what's interesting. So talking about the whole like is Microscope a role-playing game? That's the other big one, right? If it's a game, is it a role-playing game? Is a role-playing game only something where you play a character? And what's fascinating to me about that is, if that's your definition of role-playing game, then what have GMs been doing all this time? What were they ever doing? Have they not been playing role-playing games? Like, if that fun part of the process, like playing a million characters and making worlds, if that's not part of role-playing games, what are we doing, guys?
Right.
That's the best part.
That's a whole fun deep dive to go into, right? Like, I don't know if you can hear that. Johnny 5 just donated a bunch of subs, so it's Yeah, it's
Sub it up.
It's just going
Sub
off.
it up. Sub it up. I have it muted, so otherwise it'll just be deafening over here. So, but sub it up.
I'll have to go back and check my settings. As much fun as that was, now we're yeah, the interesting, just gonna laugh every time. There's a few of those trends that are really interesting. Like one of them I talked about in the questions was like people on Twitter were having debates on like what is discovery in D&D, right? Like how do you define it? How do you do it? It used to be like a core tenet of the game, but now like what are the rules for it? They don't seem to be great, and they don't really seem to be present in that same way. Like, who is the DM? Are they a player? Are they not? Are they both? Right? It's a weird tangent we could run down.
It's good to think about all that stuff. I mean, it's good to. I think here's what's really interesting is that back in the early '70s, we hit this model of like GM and players, and then it took 30 years to maybe even think that there was some other way to do it. Mm-hmm. It's the first GM-less games were probably, I think the Pool was one of the very earliest, like early 2000, some very experimental games.
Yeah, I don't even recognize that.
The Pool is like it's like a 2-page handout that is like a dice pool system, but the pool refers to the pool part. But it's like you make a little story about your character. There is still, actually that's so true. There's still a GM, but there's like you steal the narrative control. I remember the first actual 100% GM-less game.
I know. I'm just gonna cheat because I'm just getting stuck on Amber Diceless, which is not the point at all.
No, yeah. I mean, like the old ones be like Polaris, Universalis. I'm not sure what the very first one that is just purely GM-less though. But the point just being, it's not about specifically GM-less or whatever. It's the idea that we didn't question a lot of the stuff we did. That like we weren't thinking about like all the possibilities, which is kind of a ripoff because like. We're all being super creative. Like we should like be as creative as we possibly can be. And I think that there's room for all these different ways of doing it, right? There's all these, some very rigid, some very, everybody contributes. They're all okay. So long as the people at the table want to do that. That's the big thing. We all have to agree to what we're doing. If we disagree, or if like I think we're doing A, if I think we're playing a rigid old school dungeon crawl, and you think we're playing a narrative story game where you get to say what's in the next town, we are not going to have fun.
Right.
We're going to have a sad day. It's going to be no fun at all. But by the same token, and that's the thing that people don't do, they don't have that discussion at sort of the game, like what type of game, even if you're playing D&D, like you sit down to play D&D and you think, oh, we're playing D&D. Of course we're playing D&D. D&D is not a thing. There is no such thing as D&D. D&D is like 700 different games that people all play differently. And so you have to have a discussion. Got to have the talk. Sit them down. Birds and the bees.
Right.
Dungeons and the Dragons.
The dungeons and also the
Dungeons
dragons.
And the Dungeons and also the Dragons.
So it's funny you mention it like that too, because I ran into that problem. When I was running, just pick up games at a local store, because somebody showed up and used illusions. And they were just not a thing that my group ever did, right? Illusions and psionics were a thing that we never touched. And this guy was just like all about him. And you could like never more have you seen someone who's like, you did not come from our group. You are from the other side of town. And we say things and do things differently here. And it was really fun. And it put me on my toes. And, like you said, that's one of the things I'm looking for now is like, okay, we've done this and we've got a pretty good handle. Like, nothing happens in a D&D game that surprises or worries me. So it's like, okay, well, let's throw 10 people that I've never played with before, and what the heck happens now?
Yeah, and to be clear, like everyone doesn't have to do that. I think playing with your friend group is awesome. It's more just I think the downside is if you play with your friend group, sometimes you because you're relying on those social contacts, the social assumptions you already have, you don't examine things, and here's what really happens. Things go wrong. Things aren't going well, but no one's comfortable talking about it because you think like we have this system, we're following it, we're not having fun, but instead of stopping and saying like, hey, why aren't we having fun? What is going wrong? There's this rigid belief that like, well, it's the GM's game. I don't want to criticize the GM. We can't really just have an open discussion about what's happening. And it really hamstrings us as players. And as the GM too, the GM's not happy. They're not having fun. And if we just sat down and had like an open discussion about what is going wrong, I guarantee you, people are smart. If you have an open discussion about what's going on in your game, you can solve it. And then they go on the internet. I love that when people go on the internet and do the like, dear internet, I'm having this problem with my player. It's like, why are you asking the internet? Talk to them. Like, you don't just know these people. Talk to the people.
But I'm a gamer, so I'm very passive aggressive. So
yeah. Well, and it's like, but it's the culture. It's like the culture has said. The DM screen. I played with the DM screen like for a huge chunk of my life. It is. What better metaphor is there than like the DM has this like piece of cardboard like, hello, my secret world. It really sets a cultural norm of like, you know, the divide. And I love, I mean, in some ways I do love the like, I love the GM and having secrets. I enjoy that in some ways. But it's a love that can go very wrong. Mm-hmm. You have to have secrets for the right reasons. It can be very can be a bad addiction as a GM. It can lead you to the wrong assumption. And here's the thing: you can have like a whole complicated secret plot, whatever, and still have entirely open discussions with your players about playstyle. Those are not conflicting ideas, and I think people get that wrong. They think that like because they want to have a surprising adventure, they can't talk about playstyle or content, safety content, for the love of God. Like the whole ball of wax.
Absolutely.
Choo-choo hype brain, indeed. Hype brain.
We're unlocking a lot of things today, so we're gonna get a new sub emote and
let's do it. Let's do it. Right. Tell me if there's a secret word I have to say to unlock the secret thing. Tell me, I'll do it.
So we started to touch on this a little bit, so I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to use to button up this question, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was convention games and pickup games. How do you see them differing from like a home game with established players, you know, from now till the end of time, right? And like, what do you make sure you do, you know, for the setup or while you're greeting people, or you know, how do you restrain yourself to make sure that the session ends when it's supposed to?
I think the thing with Gaming with Strangers is that con games, etc. Okay, you pitched the game, right? You wrote the entry for the game. People had signed up and they're attending. I think if anything, that even further pushes the idea that like you are doing it and they are participants, right? You're running the show. If anything, from what I've seen, is that people's first inclination is to say nothing, right? You're the GM or whatever, you're the facilitator. They are quiet. They don't know what their standing is. They don't know who anyone else is. They don't know what the situation is. They don't know who these people are. Their first instinct is dead silence, no participation, listen, and hear ideas. You'll always get that one person who's like, I got a million ideas, and talking over everybody else, but no one else is talking. So that silence and honestly kind of mistrust, like they don't know these other people. Here's the best thing I've seen is when I've played like pickup games at cons where you sit down and you look at this table and you're looking at their eyeballs and they're looking at each other, and just from like their age, their gender, their clothes, whatever, you go like these people would not normally be hanging out with each other, and they know it, and they look at each other and they go,
yeah, like this.
I'm not hanging out with the accountant over there. Yeah, exactly, that guy over there. Oh no, and they're not mean about it, but you can just tell the look on their face of like, I'm at the wrong table, and they're a little, and you're like, okay, as the facilitator or the GM, depending, my work is now cut out for me, right? My job is to basically kind of like shepherd this along far enough, and this is really what it is. Can I get the game going far enough that the game takes over and that the procedure of the game gets people involved? And what I've seen over and over and over again, and I love it every time, is when you get that starting distrust. I could take a picture and there's everyone eyeballs. And then an hour later, 2 hours later, they've been making fiction together, they've been listening to each other, and they've been hearing ideas, and they suddenly all are like buddies. And everyone's like totally respectful of each other, like, oh, and they're just chit-chatting, and now they're like, we've known each other for years. That is amazing, and I think it totally stems from games like Microscope, games like that, where you ask people to contribute and you make it so other people listen to their contributions. They don't have to have amazing ideas. I think just the mere process of listening to other people's ideas generates respect. At one point I blurted out, somebody was asking about gaming And just like off the top of my head, and I realized in hindsight this was 100% true, was that when you play these games, it's about love and respect. If you don't leave the table loving, I know it sounds cheesy, loving and respecting the other people more, that was a failed game. That any good game, because even like if you nat 20 the dragon, you now have a bond with these people. You're like, yeah, we did this thing together, right? You like each other more because you played together, right? That's gaming, right? And I think what's funny is when you play with your friend group a long time, you don't notice it anymore because like you know these people already. But then when if you play with strangers and have that experience, it's so sharp because you're like, I didn't know this guy at all, and now suddenly I feel like we've got this bond. We've got like buddies, and you could meet that person. This happens all the time. You bump into somebody you met like 3 years ago and played one game with. You were sitting at the table with them for 3 hours, but you have this special bond, and they like high five you in the hallway at the con. It's like, yeah, that game we played with the thing was awesome. You were that guy with that mask and the hat. The hat was so cool. And that's what I love about gaming. I love that it makes us like each other more as people.
That was actually beautiful. I really loved that. I'm definitely going to clip that one later because you were saying it, and I'm thinking of these games I had. There was a mouse guard game I played at Gen Con 2 years ago, and I sat down and I was that guy. He only sold 6 tickets, and then he had 8 spots, so we could always have people like pick up, right? So I jammed in with some other rando, right? And we were just looking around, and it was like a full table of people, and they're like, well, those two are together, and those two are together, and actually they're friends with those two, and now they can't sit next to each other, so everyone's glaring at each other, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and I'm like, oh man, like I wanted to play this game. I wanted to play this game so bad. It was Mouse Guard Furry Road. So it was like Mad Max Fury Road, Mouse Guard. I'm like, oh like this game is going to be the best thing in the world, but now I'm playing with this asshole.
Yeah.
And no, by the end of it, I was like, me and this guy, man, we go way back.
Exactly. I love that. I love the suspicion that we start with, because you're in a con, you're in a big room, it's loud. Mm-hmm. It's like there's a lot of like, and you're like, I'm never gonna get to talk. Yeah, I love it. And then after it's high fives, mm-hmm. High fives and hugs.
That's beautiful. That's really
okay.
Good.
But I gotta be honest. Flip side is it doesn't always happen. Sometimes sometimes games fail. Sometimes people hate each other. I've been at games where I was like, I need to stop this game. These two people just do not. No, seriously, it's the vast minority, but it happens. I can't lie. And part of my spiel at Story Game Seattle was to say, that's the deal. Like, we're doing something creative and kind of weird and a little bit dangerous, and there is definitely a possibility that the game tonight will suck, and it will suck if we don't contribute, if we don't do our part. And maybe if we do, it'll still suck. But I think that's the thing that people mistake too often with gaming, particularly like one-shots, high creative one-shot games, that it is a unusual and kind of sketchy or dangerous. It's a challenging endeavor, and we have to look at it that way. We have to bring our game, right? You don't just show up and sit there and see what happens. You have to bring it. If we don't all play, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to work. And I find that when you tell people that, when you say like, hey, this game won't work unless we all contribute, I am counting on you to participate. Any one of us could ruin it if we wanted to. It kind of elevates people's thinking. People are like, oh, I need to think. I need to like be here and actually play this game for real. You're drafting them. You're like, no, we need your help for this to work. And I find it gets so much better play out of people, and it makes them take the situation much more seriously. They pay attention to what's going on. They pay attention to the other people. They look at the other people at the table, because I said to them like, all of us have vast power to make this a great game or to really ruin it for everybody. Like, you can ruin it for anyone at the table if you want to. And if you think of it that way, like, oh wait, I'm not just playing for myself. I'm playing to make this other person happy, to make this other person have a good time. And that really, I think, changes people's thinking.
That's really cool. So I want to steal that thought and kind of ask the next two questions I was thinking, because it seems like that kind of responsibility when you tell these people, in that case these strangers probably.
Yep, total strangers.
Is it similar to when you're looking for playtesting and playtesting feedback, like, do you ask them to have that responsibility to each other, or do you kind of give them these sharp, jagged pieces and you're like, I don't know, let's see what happens?
Well, and that's interesting. So when I playtest, I remind myself that anything I say as part of the playtest is meaningless. The rules that I hand them matter, because in the end, I'm going to hand people these rules. I'm not going to give them a big briefing about how they should play. I'm just going to be like, here's a book.
Yeah.
So if the book doesn't say it, right? So I try to put I try to bake that thinking into the game. And I think even like there's a difference between procedure and advice, right? I could say all day, hey, be nice to each other, listen to each other, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's just advice. Like, if I don't make the rules make that happen, what's the point, right? It's not. It has no effect. So I switched a long time ago from like advice. Advice doesn't get the job done. You got to make the procedures do the thing that you want, and sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in more obvious ways. But and I think that's why, like, follow is a really good example. Follow is a very, like, every procedure in follow is doing something to elicit this kind of loop of play where people are listening to each other. And if we do go off base, things happen differently. But if I just wrote a big page at the beginning saying, be kind to each other, it was like, well, that's nice, but that won't influence what actually happens at the table. So for playtesting, what I really tell them is, I say, don't play it like a playtest. I say, forget that it's a playtest, because that messes people up too. They think so much that it's a playtest, they put on a very critical brain, and when they put on a very critical brain, they forget to play. They forget to actually, that these games don't work if you don't contribute. They're kind of waiting for the game to entertain them. And that's not how these games work. So I'm like, forget it's playtest, just play the text, play it as it is, go. Right? Do whatever the text says, see what happens.
That makes a lot
of sense. And sometimes that works.
Do you, just completely curious, do you struggle with, I mean, I imagine not at this point, but do you struggle with, like, them bringing assumptions from other games, or perhaps previous, and you're like, I'm going to tell them. No, don't tell them. I got to tell them.
No, and it's like a science experiment, right? I could spend all day leaning over someone's shoulder coaching them how to play the game. That wouldn't help. That wouldn't do anything. What I do instead is I listen to what they're saying. I listen to the things they're getting wrong, or the assumptions they're bringing from their games, and I say, okay, is that something I need to talk about in the text? Do I need to change the text to prepare for that possibility? Do I need to bake something into the game to ready for that? Like Microscope famously has, like, the very first page of Microscope is the kind of thou shalt nots. There's this one page that basically says, like, hey, guess what? This isn't the game you think it is. Right. This isn't. You're not gonna have a character. You're not gonna play in chronological order. There's this little list of, like, negatives. Like, these are the things that are not gonna happen in this game that you're probably totally expecting if you played other games. And a lot of people gave me a hard time about it because they're like, oh, well, don't tell me what the game is and tell me what the game is. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. That's the next page. But I kind of feel like I gotta bring this up, because I gotta just right up front. This is going to be different. I gotta tell you.
You haven't played this game yet. Trust me, this is very important.
Yeah, this is. Just to get your headspace right. Don't make a lot of assumptions. In fact, don't make any assumptions, because this is going to be very different.
I'm cheating here. I'm looking on Twitter, because
on Twitter.
Yeah, in the last week and a half, I have referenced this one message 3 different times. So I never played the Pathfinder card game. Mike Selnicker posted this the other day, and I think somebody else was talking about it, and he, like, posted the actual photo, because it was the exact same thing. It was like, and I'll paraphrase it, because he was like, what's really fascinating is that if you perhaps read the rules, this game will actually tell you everything you need to know and how you need to play it. Everything you need is right there. And if you try and assume or think this is how it works elsewhere, or I remember reading this one other time, you will not, in fact, have a good time. Right, and it was,
well, this is the Pathfinder card game.
Yeah, they wrote it for
we can talk about that for a while.
I just loved the beauty of that.
Yeah, no, I think the statement is 100% true. The Pathfinder card game itself, when it came out, they totally revised the entire rulebook. The rulebook came out because we played it, I think, when it first came out, and I think they scrapped, like, a whole chunk of the rules and rewrote them.
Oh wow!
So I remember at the time there was a lot of people who were frustrated by it, and I don't know if that quote came out of that step or from later. I think in isolation,
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and here's the other thing though too is that like I was on a panel once where people were talking about having a hard time learning board game rules. And they're like, I try to learn it, but it's very difficult. And the panel was all game designers, and they were like, oh, well, you can go online, go onto YouTube, and see how to play games that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and I'm looking like bug-eyed. I'm like, am I from outer space? Because from my point of view, and I probably said some inappropriate things.
That's fine.
The rules should be readable, right? You shouldn't have to go to YouTube to learn how to play the game, right? Sure. That's our job. We're game designers. Our job is to make the rules comprehensible, right? If a YouTube video is doing a better job than our written rules, why didn't we hire that guy? Like that guy should be writing the rules for us. That's the gig, is to explain things clearly. So I feel we should, as gamers, we should demand that. We should demand clarity in our rules. Teach me the game.
That's super true, and I think when you phrase it exactly like that, like obviously everyone would agree, and I do agree. I think there's two things happening there. Obviously more, but one of them is like we don't all learn the same way. So
totally.
Absolutely, like because like you said, like let's take the politics out of what's happening and just say, should we write rules that people can read? That's a non-starter.
Of course,
like,
it's a no-brainer,
right?
Right.
Yes, and if you don't, you're being foolish. And instead say, okay, we know other people are going to learn better from YouTube, so let's find a way to do that. And I think that's been really powerful, because I talked about that in the last one. The other one, and I think I talked about this too, is the fact of the matter is we are also gamers. No one has read the DMG in like 37 years. Yeah. One person read it once and taught 5 people, and they spread slowly from Lake Geneva and a few other colleges at the time. And nobody knows what the book says. No one's read it. So we gotta live in that world too.
Right. And you're like, what? There's a table for disease infection? Yes, it's like page 3. But no, and I think tradition has hampered us too. Like the player's handbook has largely the same structure as it has always had, which doesn't make any sense. No. It's like, it shouldn't be that way. There's a famous the Star Wars, the first Star Wars role-playing game.
Was that the D20
West End game one?
Yeah, West End?
No, way before that. This is like in the mid '80s. This is West End Games. It's a D6 system.
Okay.
It is. At the time I didn't play. I was like, man, I don't really interested. I looked back at it maybe 10 years ago, and I was blown away at how it's a great Kostikian. Am I saying his name right? I think he's the designer of it. It's astonishingly prescient for like the game is like page 2 and 3 is a 2-page spread, maybe 2 and 3, I don't know. Very beginning, there's a 2-page spread that explains the entire mechanics of the game. Like, this is how the dice work.
Sure.
That's it. This is the whole thing, and everything else in the game is just like calling back to these first 2 things you learn, and that's it. It'd be like, why don't we have the D20 system on a giant 1-page spread? Like, take up the whole page. That's what matters in D&D. Like, tell me how D20 works. Don't kind of like have it buried in a tiny paragraph. Just big page, D20.
Right, like this genius figured it out 40 years ago, and the rest of us have been too stupid to look at it.
Well, it's like we just keep doing the same thing. We follow tradition. We imitate the last version. And I think that I mean, it's like, it makes sense. It's a safer thing to do, but sometimes you really got to question that, saying, is this like, if you had a person who'd never gamed and you said like, hey, I got this awesome thing, it's Dungeons and Dragons, you're gonna love it, boof, and you handed them the player's handbook,
they'd run out of here screaming.
They're done. Yeah,
never.
Like, no way. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true, because I, at this point, same as yourself, have brought a lot of people into the hobby, have played a lot of people real quick. We sit down at a table, like, well, we can spend 4 hours and you might walk away with a bit of an understanding of how the rules work, or I can just let you go kill an orc and take his pie from the dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to want that one, because if I do the other one, you're going to hate me and never try the game again.
Right.
So here's the orc.
Your spell's on page 175. You're gonna need to know a lot of things about concentration and ranges, but just keep digging. It's in there.
So chat points out, for board games, one thing I think is the lack of blind testing to understand what is hard to teach, which I think sounds a lot like, because I'm not much of a board gamer, so I think that sounds a lot like what you were saying when you were sitting there, like, biting my tongue, listening to what they're saying, and really thinking about why is that what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that there's a business element, right? That if you somebody famously said once, like, when D&D got bought, WotC got bought,
Mm-hmm.
like Hasbro, right? That they
Yep.
could make a game, they could like a book publisher, for example. One guy writes a novel,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sits alone in a room, writes a novel. Man, woman, child writes their novel. They publish it, and then that gets sold a gazillion times and makes a ton of money. Then you have this thing called D&D, where it takes a massive staff of people playtesting for umpteen months and
Yeah.
weeks and years just to write a book that's the same as the other book cost-wise, pretty much. Like it doesn't. It's not a very profitable market if you compare it to other markets. And to someone who's not a gamer, would look at that and say, like, what a waste of money that is. I don't get that. Um, Same with board game design. Like, the amount of overhead to test it is difficult, but that's the deal. That's how it works. I mean, that's, if you want to make a good game, that's how you do it.
Yeah. Well, and you're someone who does that, like, because I've seen on Ars Ludi, you looking for playtesters and doing reports and talking about, like, you take it very seriously, and I'm inclined to believe your games show that, right?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, it really is. I think about it. I think about it a lot, right? I don't even send something to playtest until I'm already really confident it's basically done.
Hmm.
I don't want to waste anybody's time. That's really what it comes down to. I think that playtime, game time is so rare and precious. We don't have a lot of time to game. I get real kind of mad about people wasting game time by, like, well, here's a game, it's maybe not done, but I guess if they said, hey, it's maybe not done, I would be fine. If you release just kind
They
of
try
a
to hide it.
yeah, if you pretend the game is done and then everyone sits there confused, every moment where people have to flip through your rules and they're confused and they don't understand what's going on, they have to debate, like, you're just wasting precious time. Like, that should have been fun time, and now, it's ruined. Particularly the more popular a game is, right? If I personally spend 20 hours fixing something, that's me 20 hours. If 500 people play that game and each of them loses half an hour, that's 250 hours we just
Mm-hmm.
lost, right? And that's, you know what I mean? So
Right.
it's better for me to lose those 20 hours than all those people lose that time. So
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a little curious. I want to ask these questions and try and combine them, and then I want to turn it over to you for a moment and see if there's anything.
sure.
You just get a free spot on this bingo board. 'Cause I was,
Unlike so far, where I've been very limited in what I
yes,
say.
yes. Because I'm really curious. Neat observations of your games, right? It's a two-part question, so if you're looking at it, it's 5 and 6, right? Like, did you notice something after the fact? You're like, oh man, that was really cool. I'm really happy that happened. Or have you seen it out in the wild somewhere? You're like, oh, this is neat, because, like, I follow you on Twitter, so I've seen you repost, like, oh, this has gotten here, right? Oh, this is over there. Oh, look what they're doing with this, right? So
It
I'm
is
kind of curious.
anytime other people play your game. I think people don't realize this enough, that if there's some indie designer or some small designer who and you play their game and you like it, tell them, or just post somewhere, anywhere, because the internet, they'll find it.
Yeah.
Game designers, the whole point is for people to play the game. So anytime anybody plays your game, it's amazing. It's great. If they have fun, even better, right? Because that's the whole point, right? I think I've usually been surprised by my own game design. Sometimes, like, I've played my own games a lot, so I have a very, very, like, I have internalized so much of how they work. I just, like, boop, 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 I run through the steps. I totally get it.
Mm.
And then someone else will be, like, talking about, like, they'll be analyzing the game, like talking about Kingdom or talking about Follow, and they'll say it's neat because, and they'll lay out some way the dynamics work. Like, this leads to this causes people to do this, and I'm like, oh yeah, right. I did that intentionally, right? Like, I forgot I did that. I remember thinking of that, like, 5 years ago. I remember that being part of my intention, but, like, you'll hear them kind of, say it back to you in a way that's so cogent. You're like, oh yeah, right. That was the idea. I totally forgot. I had a reason I was doing that, but I had this grand scheme. Or, like, problems that in my own play aren't really a problem anymore. Like, the people I'm playing with, I don't see that difficulty. So then I'm not seeing that benefit, but then other people who are having that difficulty or that hurdle, they play the game and it solves it for them, and they go, like, oh, awesome. And I go, oh, right, yeah, that's
It's
part
set
of what that
up
was
to
for.
do, yeah.
Right, it was to inoculate you against this problem, and it worked. Okay, cool. I forgot about that.
That's cool too, because, like, again, your focus on playtesting, which you can see if you read the blog, you know what I mean, and I think,
Yeah.
shows up when you play the games. It kind of makes you a little different than maybe a lot of other game designers, right? Because it's probably, you and Luke Crane and nobody else that like has played their game more than the gamers, right?
Yeah.
Because like you said, the business is like playtesting super expensive, and like we all kind of think we know how these games should go and where they should go, so you do it enough to make sure it's like, okay, nothing's sticking out like jagged and broken and people aren't like killing themselves. Right. Here it is, go play it. We got to do the next one or the business won't happen.
Right.
But you're like this, kind of unique hobbyist turned professional, right? Like, because you found that niche and it works. But yeah, you just said like, I won't put it out unless I think it's done.
Yeah.
Nobody says that.
Well, I think part of the trick too is you got to make the game you want to play. I think a lot of people try to make a game that people will like, which isn't the point at all. You got to make the game that you like, because then you'll play it 100 times and you'll still want to keep playing it. If you make a game that is like fitting a niche or like somebody else will enjoy, if you don't want to keep playing your own game, something's up. You should maybe think about what you're doing. You're not making your real game. You're not making the game that's in your heart. The other trick or the thing that I do is all the games I make, I intentionally make them to be okay. Learning games takes up time, right? If you're sitting at a table with friends, every new game you pick up, having to learn that process takes up brain space. So my thinking is always like, I'm going to make a game that you could play 20 times in a row and not be sad about it. So I try to make games that are they have a strong structure, but they're extremely flexible. They can be applied in many different ways. So if you learn that game once, you get a lot out of that learning process. But that also means me as a player, I'm very happy to keep playing that game again, over and over and over again. I can play a lot of Microscope before I get sad. I can play Kingdom every day of the week, and it will be different every time, and I'll have a lot of fun. That's the trick, is to make games that are flexible enough that you can play them over and over and over again and you enjoy. If your game's a little more specific, that's harder.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool to hear. So with that in mind, is there anything, you want to spend your free space with?
my time in the yard, my free time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You have, a whopping, I think there's 20 people here. Hold on, let me get a count. Okay, 14.
Chat, what's up, chat? I feel like I've been ignoring chat. I've not been paying attention. What's all these the skulls and bones? What's going on here?
That's the channel mascot. That's Longboy.
Oh, okay, nice. hello, chat. Hello.
Don't say we lost audio. I'll be upset.
Oh no. I hope we didn't lose audio. The audio is really the best part. The faces are charming and all.
The faces are nice. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
We got a lot of jokers in the chat.
That's true. Because I will resort to sock puppets. I'm just telling you. I have a small collection. If chat has any questions, throw them in. I had a thought a second ago. What were we going to talk about? Games.
Probably gaming. Probably gaming.
Let's talk about the global pandemic that is currently threatening all of civilization. Let's talk about that for a second.
In fairness, we really didn't have much time before we got live, and that's a thing. Because there was two things I wanted to make sure I asked you. Is hey, how are you? I'm a human. You're a human. I care about you. Two, did you eat before we went live?
Yeah, and I did. I intentionally was like, I need to eat food quickly.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that this is like this whole lockdown, shut at home. That online gaming suddenly, I didn't really do a ton of gaming, playing role-playing games across the internet until within the last year or two.
Sure.
And now I'm like, everyone's just at home. Get out there, be playing those games. It's like now is your chance. Play some games. Yeah. Everyone in chat, roll randomly, form teams, go play a game.
Go play a game.
I'm serious. No, we had a thing at Go Play Northwest convention that I was involved with for a while back. We had the donut, which is basically where people would all people who wanted to run pickup games would all show up, big mob. We'd do a spiel. We'd take the volunteers who wanted to run games. They'd pitch their games, and we would have people join up for the game. So it was like a live roster. Yeah. But we did it every session. It was fantastic. And then at one point I was like, how could we make this even wilder? And we made the lottery, and the lottery was where everybody would show up and take their name badges from the con off, put them in a bucket, and we would draw 4 names at a time, call out those names, and those people were the gaming group. And they had to go off and figure out what to play. and the idea was, enough of you know how to run some games. We're going to get something out of that.
Sure.
And we do it for one session every con, and it was awesome because it was like you might have never thought to game with these people.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty is too, the pressure's off. No one planned on doing this, right? So no one's really responsible for what happens. So everyone's very forgiving about, like, oh, if you decided to run something for us, like, you can pull Fiasco out of your bag. Like,
Right.
yeah, maybe you don't know how to run it that well, but you can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not going to criticize you because you're stepping up, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Great experience. And I think, Dave, you should just get your chat people, get them, like, everybody. Instant lottery. Fantastic.
It actually sounds like a blast. I really love that because I love going to just the games on demand in general. If ever I have time at Gen Con, I do that. But that's, like 3 or 4 steps beyond somebody's prepared, somebody's planning. Yeah, so we got two in chat, which I think you're reading right now.
Yeah, so first one, I know one of my biggest roadblocks when it comes to things life including D&D is overthinking. How do you ever run into the issue? And yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about that a little bit before, that 100% it comes from a good place, that if you're, I assume you're talking about as the GM, right, running a game, or do you mean at the table, or you mean like preparing the game?
I think he means in life too, but
sure.
But he does have a game.
Yeah, and I think part of it is as a GM, right? Yeah, the preparing, because you don't know, like I said before, you don't know what's going to happen, and that's frightening. Not knowing what to anticipate is alarming. And I think step one is to have discussion with your players to make it clear. I think for yourself, embrace the idea that you are not an entertainer. And I think a lot of GMs think they're there, that is their game, and they are responsible for the fun, and that is not true. I mean, you can try to be, but ultimately you want these people to participate, and so they are also responsible for the fun. You're all responsible for the fun, right? If you can get off the hook as being the entertainer, you're also a participant. You're also going to be surprised by what they do. It ratchets down the pressure, and it ratchets down your need to think about what's going to happen. And you can maybe be a little surprised and experience things. Also, another trick is to break it up and try playing games where there is no preparation, and no preparation is possible. A game from a while back that I still love is a game called In a Wicked Age, by Vincent Baker, same guy who did Apocalypse World. And one of the genius things about the game is that when you start, you have no setting, and you draw these cards that have these like weird thematic ideas, and you link them together to build your setting and to see who the characters are. And what's lovely about it is that you started from nothing, but in a span of 15-20 minutes, you suddenly have this kind of like budding creative game world, and no one's on the hook for having made it. You can't have overthought it. So it kind of lets you kind of just relax and play in the moment. That would be, yeah, I think changed up, but also, like I said, try to get out of the mindset of being the entertainer. I know it's hard. I was the 100%, I am the GM, this is my world for decades. But it can be heartbreaking. What was the other one?
How do you see the landscape of both design and consuming games without cons, at least for a while?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've never. I don't think cons are. So we were doing weekly meetups of strangers. Effectively, what a con is every single week. So
Yes.
I love cons, but I don't think cons are necessary. Cons are great, I think, because it gives everyone a big sense of community. And it also forces us to cut out time to play. It's like we're all playing this weekend. This is the weekend where we all put away our responsibilities. But I think you can do that a lot of the time, or flip it, right? We have this age now where it doesn't matter where somebody is in the entire planet, you can communicate with them, right? Your old friends from high school who still live in Tennessee, you can talk to them just as easily as you can somebody who lives down the block from you. There has never been a better time to be a gamer who wants to get in touch with people. The possibilities are just out the window. I mean, when I was young, I remember specifically the classic, I need to find gamers. I'm going to type up a piece of paper. I'm going to take it to the hobby store. I'm going to tack it on the bulletin board. Wanted 2 more players for my Champions game. And it was like whatever random people walked in the store that day. Now the possibilities are really limitless. What we lack is methods of connection, right? Or like a method of finding players that I think there's a lot more. There's Gauntlet, which is like a pickup meetup thing, but I'm sure there's a zillion more of like finding players, meeting players. That's the thing. But let's be honest, what it really is fear of putting yourself out there, right? You gotta be brave enough to take the step, get out there and jump into an unknown situation. On the bright side, you're doing it over the internet, so you don't even have to leave your house. So not that threatening. When people would come to Story Game Seattle every week, that was the thing that, from my point of view, was that they were being brave by being willing to show up, right? And their bravery should be rewarded with some fun. And we'd see people who would look at the meetup, not come, 8 weeks in a row, and then finally kind of get their courage up to show up for the first time, and then just never stop coming back. So because they'd made that jump. So got to be brave. Got to be a little bit brave.
It's very inspiring. I like that a lot. And we're definitely waiting for someone or some group to solve that problem right now, right? Because for the foreseeable future, we're seeing people, you know, if things are opening up, which it sounds like that's the conversation right now, it's with the risk that it could hit harder, could be worse, could be locked down for longer, and even still, like, we're going to be living with, you know, that skepticism, that caution. So we're gonna have to deal with that, you know. Yeah,
and let's face it, our hobby, we're in much better places than a lot of other people's who have hobbies. Like, no one's playing a lot of touch football anytime real soon.
That's true.
And I think the flip side to the thing I was saying before, though, is that you can also be that person who creates those possibilities for others. You could be the person who says, hey, let's get a game together, you know, and often you overcome your own fears or insecurities by being the one in charge, by being the one organizing. You're helping them. When you're helping others, you think of yourself less. You're less concerned about your own things, and then you can overcome that concern and worry. So that's why I tell people all the time. Like, if you're spending too much time thinking about yourself, help somebody else, and you will suddenly just your own self-doubts will vanish, because you'll have this task you're on of helping somebody else, and you'll see your own value in doing it.
So we pitched this.
Run a game.
I know we pitched this as talking about, you know, gaming and tabletop stuff, but
it is that's gaming.
Everybody that's going to leave is just like, these are the 3 things I need to do to be a better person. So that was
but I think gaming is about being a better person. I think gaming, think about it, right? We've got this hobby where we create, we make stuff, right? Most people don't get to make stuff. This is a fantastic hobby. We create, like, people watch movies. We make whole movies. Yeah. This is awesome. We got a great hobby. I love it. So we also get to roll nat 20s and kill dragons.
Right. Yeah. That's full circle for the folks paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, because I tried to drill it into my head, and you said it. Because I've always said the Flight of the Madamus.
Oh, Madamus. I think at the table we call it the Madamus. I'm not sure. There's no right way to say it. We just did a word we made up. So
that's fair.
Flight of the Madamus. Yeah.
Whenever somebody's like, you know, what's a good game? What's a good story? You know, like, right. You know, if I wanted to, you know, pass something along as like, this is like seminal gaming, right? Like, I that's up there. I didn't even play the game, but I think about it constantly, because to me, like, the mechanics are one thing, and the ability to get together is another, right? But the storytelling is the thing that I'm most interested in. You know, like, when I talk about my games, I talk about them as if they were a movie, right? I played a really awesome game of Unknown Armies at Gen Con. The GM was Todd Fuller, and he was like, I pay for my film by the inch. I'm interested in cool things happening, and if your scene goes too long, I'm going to stop you, because that's not what we're here for. And I've really tried to internalize that. And so the reason I bring that up is because I remember reading that and just being absolutely like, right, like, how impressive it is that a couple people just piled in and then did this amazing thing. And like you said, you know, there are a couple key moments in even that story where you're like, are we gonna get there, right? Like, as the one players, because you said you had to phrase it in such a way that you were answering his questions but really ignoring him and talking to the copy of the race winner.
And the thing about that story that's fascinating to me, at least, is that I was like, this is going to be a disaster. Like, I was looking at the things going like, I don't see where we're going with this. I don't get this. And I don't think any of us got it. Even the guy who proposed the parallel universe. This is the whole story. Sorry, chat. Chat's like, what are you talking about?
We're not here for chat.
We're not here for chat. So this is a simple story. It's about a game where it's a Microscope spin-off chronicle, where it's at a convention. I'm playing with people I don't know at all. One guy I had met like a couple years ago briefly. I don't know these people at all. and we sit and play the game, and we make the game is going to be the history of a singular starship. The starship we decide is called the Madamus. We don't know why this ship matters. We don't know what's interesting about it. We have no idea, but we're going to find out. There you go. Awesome. Flight of the Madamus. But the upshot is that people introduce things that don't quite make sense, and we don't know how to deal with. And no one had a grand plan of solving it. So what was fascinating was seeing how, teetering on the brink of disaster, how we managed to incorporate these different contributions in a way that was like mind-blowing and really, really good. But it was constantly, I'm just like, I think we're in trouble. Like, I don't know how this is going to work out. And one of the kind of ironic bits of the story is that one of the players who introduced one of the weirdest things early on had to jump up and run in the middle of the game to go to a panel, and we knew he had to go, but he jumped up and ran like 10 seconds before the line that someone said that like perfectly tied it all together and made it make sense. So he never knew. And I didn't see him for like 2 years at some other convention, and I was like, dude, because I think he was a little disgruntled, I think, because he had that kind of like, well, this game didn't really kind of gel, and he had to take off. And I was like, no, dude, you missed it. That all worked perfectly. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And I had to walk him through the whole thing, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
But that's the point. It's the story is cool, but the story is cool because the collision of the people. Yeah. But you're right. That is the Madamus was a great story, and we really did. We sat there just like in a little trance. But we had that like, huh, yeah. Because I think it's like that story is about lives and about like different paths your life can take. And I think that's another good thing about these games is the games are really about the human condition. They're about like real big issues sometimes. So, and that's really good stuff.
I think what's interesting to hear you talk about that too, because when I wrote the little note, I was like, I really want to talk about this game because I don't want to just talk about West Marches, but I do want to talk about West Marches. I have a very similar story. It's like we're teetering on the edge of disaster, but it's interesting to hear you say what I think's interesting about it is that everyone loved it, because mine is like the complete opposite. I don't know how much everyone else loves it. I think a few people really love it, and I think a few people really hate it. I mentioned my brother's 11 years younger than me, who plays games with us. He like quit the Facebook group we had for the game. You know what I mean? Like we were playing at his house, we went upstairs and didn't talk to anybody. And to me, I'm like, I still don't know if it was the best session I ever ran or played, or if it was just a session, but I'm inclined to believe it was the best because it was the exact same thing. It was in the West Marches setting, and I had the map, and for 4 years at the very top rightmost point of the landmass, there was a thing called the Unmetal Cube. It's sitting there. And I knew exactly what it did, and they never went to it, and that was okay. But one day they finally did. They went and poked it, and then over the next hour and a half, the little alien symbiotes that lived in there took over one player, and then 2 players, and then a village, and then 2 villages, and then it ended with PvP and 3 people jumping out of a window and killing each other in a courtyard, and then no one talking to anybody. And
the player's not talking to anybody, you mean?
Yeah. Or the characters. Most of the players were okay with it, but we have not been allowed to go back. It actually killed our West Marches setting for... Oh, no! Because no one wants to go back because no one wants to deal with it.
See, that's the question. Okay, so I have a similar story. I won't tell the story, but let's just say I have almost the exact same thing that happened. A very, very long range... The Dwindlevine players listening to me know that I'm talking about the 7 steps, step 6, the Mad Mage. They know what I'm talking about. Where... There's a thing in like long range campaigns. We ran for 10 years at that point, and there was a thing that happened, and it was like a big blow up of people being like, okay, well, this is not what I the bond of love between the GM and the players went wrong. They thought I was being too harsh.
Yeah.
I'm just enforcing the reality we established. Whatever. And then there was a big reveal after that they thought undermined the premise of the entire world they had been in this entire time. Mm-hmm. But I knew that it had always been true. I knew that it fit perfectly, and I had a different perspective of it. And there was this initial reaction where we'd already had like this breakup where we had not played the game for a year because of this first thing, and the return was in this big reveal. And they thought there was literally people who contacted me as though they were worried about me emotionally. Like, I heard a rumor that you destroyed your entire world. What's up with that? And I'm like, no.
My world is fine.
That's not what it was. That's not what it was. It's not that. I was like trying to put it in context, but it was the
But what's interesting, I think the key point is the parts where the players don't talk to each other,
Yeah.
like where we don't have its discussion, because it's hurt feelings. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like you're being jerked to me in the game, or I feel like you're being unfair, or I feel like you broke the contract of what we made up fictionally by changing things. You know, you brought in aliens. What's that about?
Yeah.
And those kind of hurt feelings is then we don't talk, and then we don't talk, and then it becomes a big thing. But again, it's that, communication. Talk about it.
You got to talk about it.
Talk about your relationship.
with the players, with the DM.
Gaming is dating. Just let's face it. Gaming and just dating. Same thing. Talk about it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'm glad I got to tell that story. I like yours too. I
could totally see how that's the kind of thing that, like, surprise people are possessed, attacking each other. That could totally end your game. 100%.
Yeah. It definitely got away from us, but it got away from us in such a way that up until, the last possible moment, it seemed like there was a lot of heightened tension, and we thought it was going to pay off. You know what I mean? So, anyway, it is what it is. We'll bury that deep. We won't talk about it. We'll bury it.
Also, PvP is no joke. I was a guest in a game where the DM was like, it was an old buddy of mine I was visiting, and he's like, oh, well, here, play this NPC for this one session to sit on my weekly game. I was like, awesome. He's like, oh, but this NPC is a traitor. This NPC is going to pretend to be like a local old sailor, but really he's
like, what'd you do
thrall.
Man?
Yeah, he's a thrall of the vampire, and he's going to betray them. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm into this. I'm doing it. I was totally into it. I was like, this would be great. And I'm doing the whole, like, I'm their guide. I'm helping him, and I'm throwing all this backstory about this old love of my life. And I'm really laying it thick, and I'm not telling them, but I'm talking about the vampire. Like, I'm talking about my vampire mistress who I serve, and they think it's this woman I used to love. And then I totally betray them.
Yeah,
in an awesome way. It's fantastic. Good betrayal. A+. And I think one of the players kind of got it, saw it coming. I'd gotten them to, like, put their holy symbol to seal the door of a tower, so now they had no holy symbol.
And he was like,
He was like, but he was cool. He didn't let it. But one of the other players at the table, I think the moment when I closed the trapdoor over them and was shoveling sand back on top of it, but was still yelling down to them, encouraging them to put on a good display to impress the lady. Because I'm like, you're going to be the new thralls with me. It's going to be great.
Right.
So I'm like, welcome to the team. But you're going to be eaten by zombies first. The one player looked at me with, like, shock. Just like you have broken the code of players. You know what I mean? There was, like, you have broken a law. Yeah. And he was like, wouldn't even talk to me, like, just left for the night with that, like, you monster. So the point being that there are some things which some people take very, like, they think that's part of the code of the game, and it's fair. Like, you don't make a thief and show up on the party and kill everybody and take their stuff, right? There are kind of, like, codes involved, but maybe not examined as clearly. So yeah, but I'm not sure that guy was wrong to be offended and horrified. He thought he was playing a different kind of game. That's betrayed.
That's actually where I was thinking it went, right? Like, different people are looking for different things, different games, right? Again, if he was a new player, that might have been the first time, and now someday he'll look back on and be like, that was really cool. But right, that night he was like, oh, this jerk, this friend of the DM just screwed us.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm following the GM's order. The GM's handed me this character and told me I'm an NPC with a player's face, but that's the betrayal.
Right,
I'm breaking the law. I'm not being a PC or an NPC. You know, the other thing, like the classic PC card, like, you're in a town, a new person has just joined the game, and they show up as a character. It doesn't matter who that character is, because you know they're a PC. You will allow them to join your party. Like, he's a PC. Yeah, he's a random gnome who just walked into town. We will instantly trust this character because we know he's a PC, right? There's a bond there, right?
Yeah.
If a random gnome tried to join the party in any other situation, you'd be like, who the hell's that guy?
Yeah.
Let's interrogate him. Like,
we don't trust him immediately.
We don't trust him. Yeah.
No, it's good to play with that expectation, but like you said, he didn't know that he was playing that game.
Yes, Cask of Amontillado, exactly. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened. The whole party lowered them down to the rope, took the light source, closed the hatch, shoveled sand on top, said, "Go get them, buddies!"
Hey.
They were very mad.
Yeah, after the last few Sundays. All right. So I have one more question I want to ask you, but I want to know if there's anything else you want to hit, because unfortunately we're just about at time.
I will say that later on tonight, I'm playtesting a hot new game called Epitaph, which is a game about exploring the life of a dead person.
Okay.
You go back and they'll say like, they're dead, and now you explore what led up to their entire life. So that's tonight. That's what I'm doing after this.
That's the new hotness you can tease out.
The new hotness, yeah.
Is that?
It's not my game. It's a game of a friend of mine,
Oh,
Mark
cool.
Hobbs.
Yeah.
He's the guy that did Eden. He's the husband of Caroline Hobbs, who did Downfall, which is, if you haven't played Downfall's awesome. Make a beautiful world and then destroy it.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Can you drop a link in?
It's
is there
less
somewhere
than
we should
less than 3 games.
Hmm.
And that's less than. Let me see if I can find the actual.
Probably.
It's less than 3games.com.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. I got it.
Because I think I'm not even signed in on Twitch. So.
No, you're good. Cool.
Yeah, Downfall is a sweet game. Epitaph.
Very good. Very good. So this one's a bit of a tradition on the E-Dice podcast. Now, you had a little more prep than most people, because usually we spring them with it.
Do it. Go for it. What is it?
So you are trapped on a desert or deserted island, right? And you can only pick 3 games to bring with you to last your time there.
Ooh.
What do you bring and why?
Well, here's the thing. Anybody who knows me will tell you right up front that I have a very good memory. Like, and I didn't think I did. I thought I had a normal memory, but people keep pointing out to me that I have pretty good memory.
Then you learned.
Yeah, then I realized, like, I guess I do. So I'm just taking it as per advice, which means that without books in my hand, there's a lot of games I can play. I have a lot of games completely internalized. So really, the core question, I think, is less what games do I have? It's how many index cards do I get to bring with me? How many dice do I get to bring with me? Do I get battle maps? That's really the question. How many resources like that? Because, I mean, let's face it, how many people here, if you did not have the D&D books, could not still play a pretty hot game of D&D?
Right.
Just like from your head and writing on a piece of coconut. You know? Seriously.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And actually, here's the other question that you're not, this Desert Island story, am I by myself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're alone.
Oh, that's not going to be fun at all. Well, forget it. I'm not bringing any games. If I'm by myself, that's no fun. I mean, it's going to be a much shorter game.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
You need to update that.
It's a very weird question. So the best answer, and I always butcher his name, Tuomas Pirinen. He's a Games Workshop designer for More Time and everything. He answered, I really love Puzzles and Dragons, but really I just want to bring my cell phone so I can call someone to get off the island. I was like,
legit.
Yeah, I was
Candy
like,
Crush.
Yeah. I was like, okay, he cheated, but he definitely won.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's chess.
Yeah, I'd say I would update the question to say, like, for a role playing game, it'd be like, if you've crashed on the island, but there's like 4 other people, and none of them game. What games would you want to have to show them? I'd be like, that's what I would do. I'd be like, everybody, we're gonna have a weekly game meetup. It'll be fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, that I would do.
All right. We'll update.
The PCs are the coconuts. Yes, the PCs are the coconuts.
Yeah, you have to play all
Battle
the
map
PCs.
coconuts. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Thank you so much for making some time for this and coming out and spinning a yarn or two.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Dave, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, honestly, I would love to do it again sometime.
We're not going anywhere.
No. I'll definitely hit you back up, and maybe we'll. I mean, we hit the spirit of, I think, pretty much everything we wanted to talk about, or at least that I had put down.
Your questions covered the entire breadth and history and scope of all of gaming tradition. You were like, first we had fire was made. After that, we invented chess. Cover everything from that point onward.
Yeah, you just talk for an hour and a half straight, and if you take a breath, we're losing time. So really, I need you to.
Dude, that's how I feel. It's gaming, like, tight time. Contribute.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really cool. But thank you so much for making time for us. This was a blast. If there is anything that we can either put in chat to send, I dropped you the link to your website so people know where to find you and everything. It's at Lame Mage on Twitter as well, so people can keep track of what's going on and all the cool stuff you're working on.
Thanks, chat, as well. So good. Cask of Amontillado reference. No chat stream is complete, so we have a classic reference like that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thank you so much, chat. We're gonna get out of here, and we'll be back with the Electric Dice podcast running 5th edition in about 10 minutes or so. Oh boy, I'm looking at the wrong thing. We're doing great.